Hi, my name is Erica, and I'm a covenant partner here at Doxa, and I also help co-lead a gospel community. And the scripture reading for today is Philippians 4:6-9. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your request be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. You may be seated.
Well, we are in week 3 of our series entitled The Pursuit of Happiness. And what we've been seeing is that the fullness of joy is found in the presence of God. That in order to enjoy the fullness of joy in the presence of God, that Jesus lays forward this path of faith in which we walk in order to find that joy. And what we saw last week is that along this path of faith that leads to the fullness of joy in the presence of God, that there is an enemy along this path. That there is a war around us that is constantly trying to deter us and lead us away to the fullness of life. And what we're going to see today as we continue in this series together is what we're going to see is that not only is there a war outside of us, but there is also a war waging very much in us. That there is a war in our minds. And when it comes to this war in our minds, the reality is that our thoughts, what we think on, have a great deal of power in our lives. That it shapes the direction of our life. It shapes where it is that we're heading. To put it this way, our lives are constantly moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. What we think about shapes what we do and ultimately who we are. Because what happens is our thoughts affect our affections, and like we saw last week, our affections inevitably affect our actions. And so, for example, if you go through a very painful breakup, right? That whenever you're going through that season, oftentimes in your mind, what you are thinking about is that relationship, right? All the good times that you had, all the things that were lost, all those wonderful memories. And as you think through those things, think through the pain that is happening in your life at this particular moment in time, it does something to your heart. It changes your heart in a way to where now what I'm thinking about, because I'm thinking about sad thoughts, it now makes me feel sad things. And so my sad thoughts lead to sad feelings, and then inevitably, it leads to sad actions. It leads to sad doing, right? So the next thing that you know, you're sitting on the couch with a half gallon of ice cream, watching The Princess Bride for the 5th time, wondering where's your Wesley is, right? Why? Because my thoughts affect my feelings, and my feelings affect my actions. This is why when we go through these times in our lives, that what happens is that our friends will often surround us and tell us something like this. They'll say, hey, why don't we go do something to get your what? Mind off of this. Why? Why do we target the mind in that moment when we're feeling sad in our hearts? It's because we know that these feelings that we have are generated by the thoughts in our mind. Our thoughts carry a lot of weight, a lot of power in our lives. They dictate the direction in which we are heading. Our thoughts affect our feelings, and our feelings affect our actions. And so here's the thing, if we are going to head down this path that leads to the fullness of joy in the presence of God, we not only have to understand how to wage war with what's happening around us, but we also need to understand how to win the war in our minds. How to take our thoughts captive and center them on Jesus and help it lead us directly into the fullness of joy which is found in the presence of him. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at what it looks like to win this war within our minds. might be thinking, Chris, it's Mother's Day. Shouldn't we be talking about like moms or something else like that, right? Well, man, I can't think of a better thing to talk about on Mother's Day than this, right? Like, I don't know about you, but if you're a parent in the room, I know for me, at the very least, that my heart is filled oftentimes with anxiety for my kids, right? There's so many mornings I wake up, I'm like, am I just ruining this child for the rest of their life? Like, there's a good chance this is happening, right? And so I'm excited to dive into this together. But before we do, I also want to say this quick little disclaimer. I recognize that when it comes to anxiety, that when it comes to worry, for many of us, that it is more theoretical than it is real. But the opposite end of that there are many of us in the room where it is very, very, very real. And I don't want to overlook that in the process of this. I recognize that there are some of us in this room, and you've been battling anxiety, you've been battling depression for a really long time. And for some of you, it might even feel like, man, everything that I've just tried to do, that there's just this thick cloud of darkness that just can't seem to just get off of me and just continues to linger around me. And if that's you today, one, there is hope for you because we find our hope and our victory in Jesus Christ, right? But then also I want to say this. If that's you and you feel like you need to get help, by all means, go get help. If you need professional help in your life, please go and pursue that. Because here's the thing, we believe in a God that can perform the miraculous, that he's sovereign over all things, and in that way, and he can do amazing works of healing in our lives. We also believe that that same God has gifted some people wisdom and knowledge on how the body works and how the mind works. And they can step into your life and give you some advice and some counseling and maybe even some medication to help set you on the right path. And oftentimes when we approach God in prayer, when it comes to these things, the way that God responds to prayer is with wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom leads us straight into the arms of a doctor. And so if you are someone in the room where you need help, can I just encourage you, go get help. Our hope is not found in medication. Our hope is not found in anyone else. Our hope is found on the work of Jesus Christ, in him and him alone. Do we have victory over everything? But at the same time, wisdom can drive us to a place where we can find help in the arms of other people. And I want to encourage you, if that's you today, to go find that help. And so today, what we're going to find is as we dive into this, is what it looks like to win the war within our minds. And so if you have a Bible with you, go and open up to the book of Philippians. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 4, looking at verses 6 through 9 today. Philippians 4, 6 through 9. If you don't have a Bible with you, don't worry. We'll have the verses on the screen behind me. You can easily follow along. If you don't own a Bible, we'd love to give you one. You can visit one of our hospitality kiosks by these exit doors before you leave today and pick up a free copy for yourself. Okay? Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 6. All right? Here's what it says. It says, do not be anxious about anything. Boom. Done. All right? That's it. All right? Guys, we figured it out. We solved anxiety. We just don't be anxious. All right? It's that easy. Let me pray. Band, if you want to come up. No. Do not be anxious about anything. Now he tells us what that looks like, how to put that into practice. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, if your requests be made known to God. Verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart, your mind, Christ Jesus. The first thing that we see Philippians tell us is that if we want to win the war in our minds and find this peace that surpasses all understanding, this fullness of joy that we can have and receive no matter what it is that we are walking through, no matter what our present circumstances are, that kind of peace, that if we're going to win the war in our mind against anxiety, against worry, the first thing that we have to learn how to do is bring our requests to God. He says that what we do is we make our requests known to him. That it is in everything meaning in all things that give us worry, and in all the anxieties of our life, and all of the concerns that we have, in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, that we bring our anxieties to him. Now, when it comes to battling the anxiety, the worry in our life, the war within our minds, this is typically not our first step. For most of us, instead of coming to God to release our anxiety to him, what we intend to do instead is to suppress it down within us. That as anxiety bubbles up in us, as worry bubbles up in us, as it rises in us, Instead of releasing it to God, what we tend to do is suppress it within ourselves. And there's a variety of ways that we do this. For some of us, maybe it's through digital distractions. But man, every time that you're in the car, you got to have music blaring because you just don't want your mind to run a certain direction. And so you distract it in that way. Maybe it's endless scrolling on your phone. Maybe it's constantly binging the next TV show on Netflix or whatever it is that it might be. Constantly putting images, noise, things in front of our minds, in front of our ears so that it gets into our minds and distracts us from the things that are actually waging war inside of us. I just don't want to think about those things. And so we distract ourselves with these digital means. For some of us, maybe it's not digital distractions. Maybe it's emotional avoidance. Maybe for some of us, it's overworking. That we are just constantly staying busy in our life. Because the busier we are, the less time we have to think about that thing that's just bubbling up in us. And so we just keep saying yes to everything that comes our way. Maybe you've even gotten to a point in your life right now where it's almost impossible to say no. Because you know that with a few seconds that give your mind to wander freely, it's just going to go in a certain direction and you don't want it to go there. And so we keep ourselves busy to get our mind near us. Maybe it's oversleeping to the point where we're just avoiding responsibility entirely. We're just keep shoving it down more and more. Maybe it's not emotional avoidance at all. Maybe it's more substance suppression. That maybe it's something that I take into my body in order to numb the sting and the feeling of anxiety that keeps bubbling up inside of me. Maybe that's overeating. Maybe it's over-exercising. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's drugs. Whatever it might be for you, maybe the way that we deal with the anxiety in our life is to suppress it through the means of substances. Every single one of us, what happens is our default nature is not to bring these anxieties and release it to God. Our default nature and bent is to suppress them somehow and in some way, to shove them down. But what I love that Philippians tells us is it says, hey, these anxieties in you, they want to bubble up. They keep trying to rise up. And so what Philippians tells us is that don't stop it. Let it rise up. Let it rise up to the point where you are making your request known to God. Bring it to him. And the reason why it says bring it to God, let it be known to God, is because God has the power to actually do something about it, right? That he is so merciful that he lends his ear to us. It's so powerful that he can actually do something with the anxieties inside of us. And so what Philippians tells us is, hey, it wants to bubble up in you. It's rising up in you. Don't suppress it. Let it out. Release it. Bring your request and make it known to God. Bring it to him. And then as we bring it to God, what happens is what we receive in return is we receive the peace that only he can supply. And so what we see is that as our anxiety goes up, his peace comes down. That's the trade. That's the trade. But we have to learn how to not suppress these anxieties, but release them completely to the Lord. You see, oftentimes when it comes to our prayer life is the spiritual equivalent of a last-minute field goal kick, okay? Let me explain. This past football season in college football, second round of the college football playoffs, there was the University of Texas against Arizona State University, okay? Now, I've lived in Tucson now for 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years, okay? My heart has changed in a few ways. One of those ways is I have come to love the University of Arizona. We have tried to go to almost every sporting event we can go to cheer on the Wildcats. We love U of A sports, okay? I've also come to find another thing inside my heart, which is a strong dislike towards ASU, okay? Can't stand them. I never really thought about them ever in my past, but now every time that logo appears, I'm like, right? Like, just want to burn it down, right? And, just kidding. But I look at it, I'm like, man, your mascot is ugly. Like, what is that? Is that a goatee? I don't know. Your colors really like burnt ketchup and mustard? Like, this doesn't jive. And I remember that game came on, and I hardcore rooted for Texas, not because I'm from Texas, but because I don't want ASU to win, okay? And in my mind, I remember praying to God, like, Lord, give the Longhorns supernatural ability to crush them, right? Where they can't go home. They're so sad. Their whole football program just dissolves. And for the first 3 quarters, that's exactly what happened, right? They destroyed them. And then all of a sudden, ASU comes back and ties the game in the 4th quarter. Texas gets the ball, they drive down the field, there's 2 seconds left on the clock, they set up for a last-minute field goal, okay, to win the game. They are inside the 40-yard line. The kicker for Texas has made 9 out of 9 kicks from that distance. And I'm thinking, we didn't destroy them, but we're still gonna win this game. He kicks that ball, it goes up. It looks like it might be going through the uprights. It sails more left, hits the goalpost, bounces off. Going to overtime, blessed be the name of the Lord, Texas won. But whenever that ball was in the air on that kick, everyone in that stadium and everyone at home was leaning one way or the other. They were either doing one of these, trying to somehow manipulate the ball to go in through the uprights, or they were doing one of these, trying to get the ball to go not in the uprights. Or maybe they were using their hands to try to somehow magically move the ball. And when it comes to our prayer life, I think this is a good example of what it looks like for us. You see, here's what happens for us. We're pretty good at making our requests known to God. We're not good at releasing control. We're good at letting it be known, sending it up to him. But once we let him know and invite him into our mess, we're not that great at letting go. It's like we kick a field goal and we're constantly trying to manipulate it as it's in midair. And what Philippians is telling us is that if we want the kind of peace that only God can supply in the midst of anxiety and worry, then what we have to do is not only make our request known, we have to release it. We have to give it to him. We have to trust him with it, that it's better in his hands than it is in ours. We see this beautifully in the life of Jesus, right? Moments before his death, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples. And Luke, at this point in time, describes Jesus with the most agony we've ever seen him. Luke says that his sweat reflects drops of blood. That's how much agony is in his heart. And what does Jesus do at this point in time? He brings his agony and he brings it to God. He makes his request known, but he also releases control. He says, Father, take this cup from me. That's my request. Take this cup from me. But not my will be done, but yours. It is making it known, and it's a full release. It's, God, I am trusting you with this. I'm not trying to hold on to it, control its outcome. I trust you because you are sovereign and you are worthy of all praise and you are worthy of my trust. These are better in your hands than they are in ours. And so when it comes to winning the war in our mind and finding the peace that only God can supply, we have to learn to release entirely the worries and the anxieties within us. But not only is it a release, it's also a replacing. That not only do I release my worries, but I replace my worries with worship. That's what we see in verse 8. Look at verse 8 with me. It says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, it says, think about these things. In other words, what Philippians is telling us, hey, you're thinking about something. And what's typically occupying your mind are all these anxieties, all these worries, all these things. And a lot of times they're good things, right? They're concerns for our children. They're cares for the people around us. They're good things. And what Philippians is telling us, hey, you're holding on to all this anxiety. That's what's in your brain constantly. And what you need to do is you need to release those things to God. Trust him with it, but not only release, but replace it. That I replace my worry with worship. And instead of meditating on those things that cause worry and that inevitably lead our life down a path of anxiety, then instead we change our thinking to think about things that are far more excellent. The imagery that we kind of get here is this imagery of a cow chewing the cud, right? I don't know if you know much about cows. I don't. But one of the things that I do know is that when they eat, they chew quite a bit on whatever they're trying to consume. And when cows chew the cud, what they do is they grab some grass, chew it, swallow it, they vomit it back up, chew it again, swallow it, throw it back up again, and all this cycle goes on and on and on and on again. And the whole idea behind it is that they're trying to get all the nourishment out of whatever it is that they're eating. And what Philippians is telling us is saying, hey, you need to think about these things. You need to chew mentally on these other things. That word think literally means to ponder. It means to dwell on. It's a constant just stewing on these far more excellent things. You see, for us in our minds typically run to worry and anxiety. That's where it goes. I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, that's exactly what my mind just runs to. All the worries and the concerns of the world. And if I'm not careful, it can continue to chew on that over and over and over again, and it leads me down a path of anxiety, not a path of joy, and not a path of life. And what Philippians is saying is, hey, change the way that you think. Think about the right things. You see, for some of us, what's occupying our mind maybe isn't so much the worries that we have. Maybe what's bringing the anxiety in us is not the worries, but the lies that we've chosen to believe. Like maybe you're someone in the room who, whenever you were younger, there was something that some other people said about you. Maybe they said it to you. Maybe there were some relationships that you had in your life that just kind of, you lost them. And you feel like it's your fault. And based off of what you've done and the things that you've said and the things that other people have said to you or maybe even about you, maybe it's led you down a path where you've bought into this lie that says, you know what, I don't think that I am lovable anymore. And maybe you put some walls up to the people around you not to let them in or get anywhere close to you because you've bought into that. And what Philippians is telling us, he says, hey, what you need to think about is you need to change that thought that's a lie in your mind to something that is true. That God deeply cares about you. That he loves you to such a degree that he sent his son to die on the cross for you. That whenever John tells us that for God so loved the world, that the world includes you, you're part of it. That he so loved you that he sent his son to come and die on the cross for you, to save you from your sins and to bring you into the fullness of life and the fullness of joy that's only found in him. And the soundtrack in your mind is, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, and it's all these lies that I've chosen to believe. And what Philippians is saying, hey, stop thinking about those things, cast those things on the Lord, cast those insecurities and anxieties on the Lord, and you think about what is true. You think about what God says you are and who God says you are. For some of us, maybe it's not lies that fill our mind, maybe it's anger. Maybe we've been stewing on something with an unforgiving heart for years. And it is crushing your soul. And it is destroying your spirit. That there was a wrong done in the past. And whenever your mind gets a few free minutes, it just runs to that thing, just to stew on it over and over. And it's filling your heart with anger and bitterness and resentment. And because it fills your heart with those things, those are the things that you do. And man, you've gotten to the point now where, man, instead of even thinking of forgiveness as an option, you just run the complete opposite direction. And what Philippians is telling us, hey, you got to stop thinking about that and think about something better and far more excellent. That Jesus came and paid your debt. That you were forgiven a great debt. And because of that, you can forgive others. Our minds are constantly running in a variety of directions. And what Philippians is telling us is that if we want to win the war in our mind and find the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that only God can supply, the fullness of joy, then what we have to do is first release those things fully to God and replace them with worship. That we think about these far more excellent things. For me, what that looks like in my life, just personally, is a lot of journaling. I've mentioned this before, but I journal a lot. Partially because my mind keeps running to all these things I don't want it to go to, right? And so in the morning, I wake up and there's a ton of anxiety, a ton of worry. All these things just rush into my head. And one of the first things I do in the morning is I pull out my phone. I have a journal app on my phone, and I just type forever. And sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's several minutes, sometimes it's an hour or more. And I'm just getting all the ugly in my mind out and onto this page. And for me, that's a way where I am just symbolically, if it's getting out of me and onto this page, I'm getting it out of me and onto the Lord. It's how I release it to him. And then as it gets all out of me, then what I do is I pick up the word of God. And I read it and I remind myself of the truth of who he is. That he's faithful, that he's good, that he's sovereign over all things. That he's a wonderful God. That he's gracious and merciful and kind. That he's not lost sight of me in the midst of this. That even in the midst of darkness, God is very much present. And I remind myself of his truth, and I pick up my journal again, and I just speak those truths down deep into the depths of my heart and my soul. Reminding my heart that he is good even in the midst of these things that are bringing anxiety and worry. Maybe that's something that you can do to help cast those things onto the Lord and replace your worry with worship. But here's the thing, when it comes to winning the war in our minds, it's not a one-size-fit-all thing. Some of you might be drawn to journaling. That might be your thing. Some of you, that might not be it. Maybe for some of you, you need to get in the habit of just taking a walk around your neighborhood or a walk around your campus to just be able to process with God what's happening in your heart. Like, I don't know about you, but whenever I sit down just to pray and it's just silent, it's hard for me to focus my mind on God because it gets distracted with everything else. So maybe you just need to go on a walk. And as you're walking, you're being reminded of the beauty of God's glory as you see it through the midst of creation. For some of you, maybe you need to change the soundtrack in your life. That as you're traveling and as you're commuting into different places, that you just need to blast worship music and crank it up to 11 and just sing at the top of your lungs and remind your heart that he is good, that he is faithful, that he can take dead things and make them alive again. I don't know what it looks like for you, but if we're going to win the war in our minds, we have to release these worries and anxieties fully on the Lord. Release them fully and replace the worry with worship. And as we do those things, as we release and as we replace, Philippians says that what will happen is we'll receive. That we will receive the peace that only God can supply. Verse 9. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. He says, practice these things. And look at this. And the God of peace will be with you. In verse 7, we see that as we release our anxieties on the Lord, that the peace of God that surpasses all understanding is with us. Now in verse 9, as we replace worry with worship, what we find is the God of peace is with us. As we release and as we replace, we receive his presence and we receive his peace. And the peace that God supplies is the peace that surpasses understanding. It's a peace that doesn't make sense. It's a peace that even in the darkest moments in our life, that we can stand confident and sure in who our God is. It's an amazing kind of peace. And it's a peace that only he can bring. Horatio Spafford in 1870s experienced this firsthand. Horatio was a successful businessman in Chicago at the time, but was also a devout Christian and follower of Jesus. Him and his family in 1873 were going to get on a boat and head to England to be a part of a Christian revival happening in England. As they were about to get on the boat, Horatio had some business matters pop up that he needed to attend to, so he sent his wife and his 4 young daughters on the boat without him, while he stayed behind and then caught the next one. As the boat set sail for England, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, it collided with another boat. In the matter of minutes, both of those ships sank to the depths of the sea. 200 plus people died in that accident. 4 of them were Horatio's daughters, none of which were over the age of 10. The only surviving member of his family in that accident was his wife. When she got to England, she sent him a telegram. And all it said was, survived alone. I don't know what to do. Horatio boards a boat to head to England to be with his wife. As he's headed to England to be with his wife, the captain comes to him and tells him that they're approaching the spot where they believe the accident to have happened. Horatio, sitting over the side of the balcony on this boat, looking down into the depths of the waters, realizing that he is over the watery tomb that took his 4 little girls. In the middle of anguish, in the middle of anxiety, in the middle of heartbreak and mourning, at the same time, in the depths of his heart, was a small little sense of hope and peace. And he took out a pen and he wrote just a handful of words. All he wrote was this. He said, "It is well with my soul." Horatio gets to England, gets reunited with his wife. They make their way back to Chicago, and a few days later, after they get back to Chicago, he writes one of the most famous hymns the church has ever sung. In the first verse of that hymn, this is what he writes. He says, "When peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot. Whatever God has brought my way, whatever my lot, thou, God, has taught me to say, it is well with my soul. How can someone in such pain and agony be able to pen those words? Because he knew that the peace of God is not based on circumstance. He knew that I need to release my anxiety, replace it with worship, and replace it with worship he did. And peace overwhelmed him, even in the midst of the darkest hour of his life. That's the kind of peace I want for you. That's the kind of life I want for you. The kind of joy, a joy that you can have and embrace no matter what circumstance you find yourself in. That's the peace that I want for you. And that peace doesn't come unless we release our anxieties in the Lord, trust him with all of it, replace our worry with worship. And in return, what we receive is something far better. What we receive is the peace that only God can supply.